My name is Tyler Michael Smith. I'm a composer for film. I also produce music and arrange and orchestrate in the music world as well. And yesterday I did a class on film scoring. I call it the art and journey of film scoring because it is a journey and in many ways. And I shared some of my journey. I'll briefly go over that real quick. I grew up in a very musical home. An aspiring Christian artist named Michael W. Smith is my dad. And so I was around music a lot of my life, and I always had a love for film. But those two kind of came together as I was a teenager, and my brother started experimenting in filmmaking. He made a short film that I composed the music for, and then he got funding to do a feature. And that's what sort of launched me on this crazy path. The path of stupidity, as Aaron, my friend, called it, but I kid when I say that. It's an amazing thing. I've been so thankful for the opportunities that God's given me through this process. And I'm very happy to be here with you today to share some of the things that I learned. I want to teach you the things that no one taught me to, the things that I learned the hard way. I would hate for you to go through what I went through to get through there, so I'm going to try to cover all of that. And first off, I guess I know I asked you to raise your hand earlier. Who in here is a composer or aspiring composer who has never composed music for a film? But keep your hand raised. But you want to, right? Maybe. Okay, maybe. All right. Because I'm going to be pretty foundational here. We're going to start with the beginning of what do you need in order to do that? And honestly, nowadays, the technology that we have gives us so much more. There's so much more opportunity because of the technological advancements. And even when I started, the tools we have at our fingertips just keep getting refined and keep getting better. And honestly, you don't have to spend a fortune to get started, and I want to kind of prove that to you as I go through the different pieces of technology you're going to need to get started. So, first off, does everybody know what a DAW is? Raise your hand if you don't. It's okay if you don't. Okay. That is a digital audio workstation. It's essentially going to be the canvas that you're going to make your score on. Okay, this is software that you buy for your computer. It could be Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Cubase, Studio One. There's a number of them. I'm going to give you my favorites. I'm a little biased here because I've been using Logic Pro since I started. But it remains, in my opinion, the most cost-effective, beginner-friendly, and proven for film scoring piece of software available, in my opinion. And costs $200, and it gives you everything you need, and I've never had to pay for an update since I bought it. So, once again, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I'm recommending it. This is going to be where you're doing all of your work, so at least in the beginning stages. Now, the hardware you're going to need a computer. There are options on the market. Once again, you don't have to spend a fortune. I think a good option would be a Mac Mini. That's probably the most cost-effective. If you're going to be using Logic and have to use a Mac Mini is a good option. You can even look for refurbished models. I would recommend getting one with at least 32 gigabytes of RAM. You're going to need processing power to do what you're going to be doing with film scoring. So a MIDI controller, this is a keyboard that will connect your computer through a MIDI cable or a USB cable, and that is going to help you a lot when you're inputting notes into your DAW. Studio monitors, some kind of speaker that are going to hook up to your computer, which you're also going to need an audio interface to bridge the gap between your speakers, your computer, and any kind of inputting audio you're going to be recording, and a microphone if you're going to be doing live recording. If you're going to be only programming, you don't need a mic. You're going to do it all within the computer. Hey, Joseph. Nice of you to join us. So that's on the hardware side. These are just the very basic kind of starting point items you're going to need to get going. Software, this is where the technology really has advanced to the point where it is way more accessible and available. And the place to start really is when you buy your DAW, it will come with pre-existing libraries built into it, okay? And so my first recommendation would be to look at what you have. Start with what is built in. Not all of these are going to be high-quality sounding instruments, but it's a good starting place. So Logic, I know, comes with a huge library of sounds that you can listen through. And some of them are good, some of them are decent. Contact is a third-party instrument by a company named Native Instruments, who most third-party libraries use this as their hosting kind of software. So you need to There's a free version of this, but I recommend getting the paid version because you will be able to use a lot of these third-party free libraries that I'm talking about in just a minute. It doesn't cost a ton of money to get that, but it's very, very helpful to have that when you're using third-party plugins. Now, I say here free third-party libraries, so different companies, especially nowadays, not when I started out, like I had to buy it, you had to buy everything. Now these libraries are creating kind of free versions of what they have, or maybe free instruments that you can download off their website. So Spitfire Labs is one of the best in my opinion because it has a large list of different instruments that you can download completely for free. Project Sam, the free orchestra, that's another option. Vienna Symphonic Library, free instruments, and you guys can like take pictures of this or whatever. This is not everything. There's an extensive list of libraries that are accessible to you. I'm trying to give you the cheapest way to start, okay? These do end up, it doesn't end up costing you money, but you can start with this. Orchestral Tools, Sign Factory, free editions. These are all free to download. So this is a great starting point, and some of these are really good sounds. I use Spitfire Labs on my professional scores that I write. It's not like you're getting something that's cheap. So that is a good starting point. This is kind of giving you the tools to really get working and get writing. We can get into the more details of the paid libraries that you end up buying, and I think I gave you guys some resources from yesterday. And those of you who weren't here yesterday, I forgot to bring my sheet with me, I apologize. I actually left it here, it probably got thrown away. But I will share a QR code with you guys after where you can download some free resources. I made an ebook called The Art and Journey of Film Scoring that you can download that kind of covered what we went over yesterday, and it includes a list of all of my favorite libraries that I use. So consider it your kind of cheat sheet to getting started. So that's kind of the tech side, the software. Most of what I'm going to be talking about today is actually kind of the next steps of you want to do this as a career. It's one thing to score a film, it's another to make a career doing it, obviously. And as far as my journey goes, it was a process getting there, you know. But you got to start somewhere. And so I was asked to come speak at Liberty University. Oh gosh, when was this? A year ago, I think. It was less than a year ago, actually. But I was asked to speak to students that were getting close to graduation. It's like we want them to hear what are the next steps. You know, we have these tools. We've been learning about film scoring. How do we actually apply it? How do we make a career of this? And so as I was thinking about when I wanted to speak, I was going to kind of just go off the cuff and talk about my experiences and stuff. But as I started to think about what are the things that I did in the beginning that actually worked? And along the way, things that I learned, oh, you know what, that was effective. That comes together. And I actually came up with an acronym that worked really well. The acronym is SCORE, S-C-O-R-E. And so, funny that it worked out that way, but I was like, you know what, I can be a forgetful person. I still have not forgotten that SCORE. It's what I do, easy to remember. And not only for the students that I was teaching, these principles, I was reminded, I was like, these are ones I need to continue to practice. Even as I keep scoring films, it's like you should always be practicing these things. So I want to kind of break down what that looks like, and hopefully it will make sense to you guys. So, scoring films and making a career doing it. So the four aspects that work together. So we have S, which is the seek, C is the connection, O is the offer, R is the referral, E is the exhibit. I'm going to go through each of these, and we're going to kind of break down what all of them are. And some of them work together, as you'll see. So the seek is the proactive ask. These are never fun to do, especially for me. Probably most creative people, we prefer to like stay in our cave and just create, but you kind of have to leave the cave and go out and seek. So these are the cold emails, the inquiries to production companies, directors, producers. Research too, like research what films are in development, search for contact info, learn the industry, what are the companies that are producing theatrically, what are the networks putting out, you know. Learning each of these is super important. There's some great resources out there, like, IMDb If you have a pro account there, you can go and you can actually find contact info for a lot of these producers and production companies that aren't available on the main website. So I recommend getting a subscription to that if you don't have one. It's a great place to learn and find contact info. And so when I was first starting out, I had done a film, my first film with my brother I had mentioned, but I was trying to figure out what's the next step. So what I did was I did a little research, found the production companies that were in my area, local to me, and this is another recommendation, is start, you can cast a pretty wide net over the whole country, obviously. There's a lot of production companies out there, but I recommend starting small, starting with an inner circle of the area you live in, finding creatives around you that you can work with. And so I did that. I found a list of production companies, and I sent out probably 100 emails one day of just the same thing. Hey, I'm a composer for film. I did not have a huge resume at the time, but I wanted to gauge, interest. The majority of those emails, I got no response. And the responses I did get were mainly something to the effect of, thank you so much for your information. We don't need original music right now, but we'll keep your information for future. Never heard back from them again. That was a typical thing. So don't be discouraged by that if you get that email. But of all those emails, there was one response. In fact, the guy actually called me, and he said, hey, I got your email, and it actually came at a really good time. I'm working on a documentary right now. We're in post-production, and we need music. His name was Ken Carpenter, and I jumped on it. I said, of course. Their budget was not huge, but I was very eager, and so I scored that documentary. Well, little did I know that would turn into probably 4 or 5 other jobs with Ken, either directly or indirectly. So I think back to that moment when I was sending those emails out. If I had not done that, I never would have met Ken. And then that relationship led to another. And so this is the less glamorous part of the job, but it's important. It's important to do. So just be proactive in your seeking. And this is something I should still do.
When you do these cold emails, have you found anything that makes the email more successful or less successful?
Yes, your question is, I'll repeat it since he didn't have the mic, but he said, is there something when you're doing these cold emails that makes it either less or more successful? I would say, I'm going to answer your question actually as I go through all of these, because there are elements that I'm about to cover that are going to make those emails more successful. And so I'm coming back to that question in just a minute. So the seek, that's basically what this is. You're actively seeking, and it can feel awkward, it can feel out of reach, but it's just striving to make that connection. And that's actually going to lead into the next one, which is C, which is connection. It's the networking and relationships. It's honestly what we're doing right now in this room. Being at events like this, where you are meeting other filmmakers, you are making those connections. It turns the cold emails into the face-to-face, the handshakes. This is a relational industry, it really is, and creatives like to work with their friends. I remember I was having coffee with a much older composer who has had great success in what he does. And I asked him, I said, Michael, what's some advice you can give someone like me at my stage in my career? Things you could look back and change, when you were my age, what's advice that you would give? And he said, honestly, people like to work with their friends. And it's true. Having a relationship with the people you're working with is massive. Having some kind of history with them. I realize that that's not gonna happen every time, but building a relationship with the people you're working with and having a good attitude, having a good, another person I respect greatly said, it's learning the art of hanging out. I know it sounds weird, but does that person enjoy spending time with you? While you're scoring for them, you're gonna be spending a lot of time with this director, and it's important for that relational aspect to really be at the forefront. So looking for opportunities to connect with these directors, producers, filmmakers. Once again, film festivals, conventions, local film clubs and groups. If you're not part of, look around, see what's available. I know being here, you guys obviously knew about this film festival, but look around your area. Maybe there's groups that you don't even know about that are meeting. I'm part of the Faith and Entertainment Guild. That's one group that they meet twice a year. There are a lot of these kinds of things that go on throughout the year, and just try to stay in touch with these different people and the different activities that are going on. Articulate clearly what you do and what you will be willing to do. So when you're meeting somebody, I know it can be awkward to, it's not like you're trying to be overly pushy or anything, but just clearly articulating like what are your skills and what can you bring to the table? How can you serve their project? What are you passionate about too? Like if there's a project that someone's working on that you feel an inclination towards, I would let them know, hey, that idea really intrigues me. I'd love to talk more about that. Would you tell me about your project? Let's, have that conversation. And let's, like I said, show interest in others' projects without being too pushy. It's a hard thing to do sometimes as a composer when you want, like, oh, I really want to be part of that project, but not to be too ambitious, because like I think every movie, there is a right composer for every project, it feels, and even in the director's mind as they're looking, it's like, even though they might not choose you as a composer, it's like they're looking for that person who's going to be right for their project. And I remember I had reached out to, a few years ago, I don't know if you guys know who Karen Kingsbury is, but she's an author and she started her own production company. I had some kind of connection to Karen. My mom was friends with her and stuff, so there was some relational connections there, but her son was directing this film that was based on one of her novels, and I had just seen some posts about like, oh, they're filming it locally, this is cool. And so I actually just sent him a message and I said, I'm intrigued about your project, I would love to talk. We ended up getting coffee together, and I remember I was being careful not to be too, hey, I'm the guy, you gotta hire me. It was more, hey, I would love to have a shot at this and talk to you about the music and stuff, and they ended up doing an audition where they gave me a scene, and I think a few other composers submitted some ideas, but I ended up getting that job, and I have now worked on them with their second film this past year. But once again, that goes back to the seek thing. If I hadn't proactively gone, I'm interested in this project, I'm going to reach out and talk to him about this, nothing would have happened. So, super important, exchange contact info and stay in touch, follow up. I think one of the most important things is beyond making like new connections, is maintaining the relationships that you already have, and that's why coming to things like this is great, because you get to see the same people, and catch up and see, where you're at, what projects you've been working on, and just stay in touch with them. I think that following up is super important. Just like those cold emails you sent out, let it not just be one email, like if they respond, if there's a conversation, keep that conversation going. Even if it's been a few months, just checking back in and circling back is really important. The next one is O. So O is offer. And this is, I think, I touched on this briefly when I got together with that director who ended up sending a scene for me to score. This actually happens pretty often when they're trying to pick a composer if they haven't landed on it, is they'll send you a scene that you'll score on spec, basically, and it's kind of an audition. There'll maybe be a list of other composers who are submitting their ideas, and they'll make that decision based on their favorite, submission. So that's something that you can offer. You can say, I'm really interested in your project. I would love to score a scene if you send it to me, and just to see if it's a good fit. Help in ways that are beyond the music. So when you're serving as a composer on a project, you obviously want to serve from a musical side, obviously, do the best job you can on the score, but find ways to go above and beyond. Help with the marketing, offer to at least. Be like, I'm gonna post about this, I'm gonna let people know what's going on, I'm gonna spread the word about your film to make it successful. Obviously, their movie's successful, it's gonna be good for you, obviously it's gonna be good for them. And just thinking about ways that you can help beyond just the score. I think this is super important, once again, these kind of all tie together, because if you're doing these things, and going above and beyond, you'll get to the point where clients that you've worked with will refer you to others. Another filmmaker friend comes along and says, hey, I'm looking for a composer on a project. Be the type of composer that gets recommended. Hey, you know what, I had a great experience working with this person. You should look into their music and reach out to them. Integrity and character are super important. Like I said, it's a relational industry, and we need to treat it that way. It's not just a job. We're supposed to walk with integrity as believers. We got to, that is super important on a project, because you might write the best score ever, but if you were a jerk to work with, they might not come back and hire you, and it's just is not a good, it doesn't leave a good taste in their mouth. So go above and beyond, like I said, when you're working. Just find ways to serve and to elevate the project. And remember that you're like, it's not just about you, you're part of a team, you know. It's so important to have that kind of relationship with the director where you got to leave your personal feelings kind of at the door when you come into a project. You're collaborating with a team to get a project done, and sometimes you might not be speaking the same language. Sometimes you may have a different direction musically, and the director will have to correct and be like, you know what, I think we need to go this way. And to be able to easily go, yeah, I'm going to pivot and go the direction we need to go is super important. Being flexible, not getting your feelings hurt, you know, when maybe they don't like an idea. Very important. And I can't stress this enough, but exhibit, you have to have a place to showcase your work. Whether that's a website, SoundCloud page, social media, some kind of place that will point people to listen to some of your work that you've done, some kind of portfolio. Because I doubt you're going to get hired if they haven't heard anything you've done. It's just very doubtful. So having an easy way for them to access that is very important. And put some of your best work on there. Give them variety, you know, give them, show that you can do multiple genres, show that you can do a thriller, you can do a romantic comedy, you know. Diversify yourself as much as you can. Publicity, podcasts, interviews, you know, these are great marketing tools too, just talking about what you're working on, you know, finding different platforms.
On your exhibit thing, when I was wanting to work with you, I just listed what you have on social media.
From social media, yeah, okay.
You were putting clips there.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, honestly, more than my website, social media has been a much bigger tool to my portfolio than anything else, for sure. Not only does it like showcase your work, but it kind of lets people know what you do. I think being able to communicate that clearly, like I said, when you're in that phase of connecting, like to be able to articulate, this is what I do, very clearly, oh, Tyler is the guy that does scores for, you know, this genre or whatever, like being very, very clear about the kind of projects you work on, the kind of projects you want to work on. And then through social media, like Joseph just said, we've worked together. He's director that I worked with on We Three Kings. And I actually didn't realize that's how he found me. But it's funny, you hear stories of, oh, I just saw this little clip of something you were working on. And that happens a lot. So once again, you gotta be intentional about exhibiting, because it's not always easy to do. Like I said, the easiest thing to do it, like the easiest place to slip into as a composer is the cave that you never leave, you know? But you have to leave the cave, and this is part of that. This is the whole reason I created this acronym. It's not just to help you guys, it was to help me too. As I was teaching, I was going, you know what? I probably should even, when I'm in the middle of a project, I should go back to this list and see if I'm actively doing these 5 things. Is it 5? SCORE. Yeah, it's 5. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so score. Yeah. Seek, connect, offer, referral. We're on it right now. Exhibit. Great things to remember. So that's on the networking side of things. If you're bored now, you can go over to Aaron's. He's still talking about networking if you want to learn more on that. But I would actually love to open the next part up for just Q&A, because I know that kind of went fast and covered a lot of different things. But I'd be happy to take any of your questions. Let's see. Is that the one that's on? Okay.
Yes, yes. Testing? Okay.
Can you explain a little more what you meant when you said on spec?
On spec. Yeah. No compensation. So you're offering knowing that like this might end up being a no, and you have to weigh out whether or not it's worth it. And I think most of the time it is, because yes, you might put work into this short piece of music, but if it gets you the job, I think it's totally worth it. And also, it's for people who are starting out too. It's like it's great experience to have a scene in front of you just to like work on music for, even if you don't get selected. We did the Judge the Composer competition earlier, which some of you guys submitted for. Fantastic job, everyone. But it reminds me of that, like you have the scene that you're, multiple composers are working on, their own kind of take on that scene. And whether or not you get picked as the composer, it's a great experience, in my opinion. So, yeah.
I'm a little bit on the other side of the aisle. If you are a filmmaker and looking for a composer or someone to score your film, is there a place that you can go to find composers?
So if you're a filmmaker and you're looking for a composer, is there a place you can go to like look for a composer?
Right. To find someone.
That's a good question. Gosh, like, are you talking about like a place you can go online maybe, or like a network where you can like find different? Yeah, I mean,
I'm not a filmmaker.
yeah.
My daughter is a filmmaker, and she's in her last stage.
Uh-huh.
And she's looking for someone to, I guess, score and put music to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so it would be helpful to give her some information of maybe where she can go or who can she network with to possibly get that done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you can find my information on that. No. Well, we have a bunch of composers like in this room, even in this community. I think that's why it's important for this, like I said, the relational aspect and the connecting, and like when you have a network of composers, like I said, with you said it was your daughter or your daughter's working on it. Okay, this is where oftentimes like filmmakers will ask, fellow filmmakers, hey, who did the music for this? Because that was really, even if there's a movie that she watches and she's like, I loved the music there, it's pretty easy to find the contact info. Go to IMDb, just find, who composed the music. Somehow get their contact info, whether or not, she knows the director. Nowadays, it's so easy. Our world is so connected. There's so many ways to reach each other. Like, I remember, Joseph, how you reached out to me. Was it through social media? Was it on the phone? I can't even remember how you got me. It might have been Facebook message. Exactly, there you go. Yeah, so once again, it's like, we did not know each other until that day. I got that message from him, and here we are.
When I was first starting out as a composer, one of the primary learning curves that I faced was building a bridge between being expressive on a classical piano versus a MIDI keyboard. And judging from your experience, do you think it's easier for new composers to invest their time in learning the art of using a MIDI keyboard well, or manipulating the MIDI information after it gets into your digital audio workstation?
Both. I would say it is like learning to play a different instrument, a MIDI controller. It's not the same as, I play piano, so this should be easy. These libraries are libraries you have to learn. Like when you play them, they respond differently to the way you play them. I think because of the way maybe I learned and I was experimenting with composing. I had a lot of time in the studio where I was getting a feel for how that process worked. So I think it's important to learn both. You can do one or the other, like you can input the notes and do all the changes after the fact. I still, as a composer, when I'm programming like that, it's both, from both sides. It's when I'm putting the information in, and then after the fact, doing edits and tweaks to the information that's in there. It's a time-consuming process, for sure. Like, it does take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time to get things to sound the way you want them to, but it's worth putting the time in. And after listening to some of the submissions today, I could tell, like, these guys know what they're doing. They've spent time on these, like, just like you. I'm sure you edited that many information, I'm sure, like, to get it, like, a lot, right? Yeah, exactly. It's time-consuming, but it's worth it when you get that sound that they hear when they're like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell this isn't live. It sounds real. It sounds, and it emotionally hits where it's supposed to. It's a lot of tweaking, a lot of editing.
On the topic of MIDI keyboards, which ones would you recommend?
Well, I'm a piano player, so I'm pretty picky on these, so I might be different, but I prefer 88 keys. I prefer a weighted feeling keyboard versus a weightless. There are maybe some perks to having one that is less of a heavy weighted feel for programming, but because I'm a piano player, and I play a lot of piano, and on my scores, there's a lot of piano. Having the ability to have a full 88 keys in front of you, to me, is really important, personally.
Could you name any like specific brands? Or
Yes. I've always played Yamahas. That may or may not have to do with the fact that my dad's been endorsed by them for years. But it's just what it was always around, so it's what I was used to. And so I have a Yamaha CP88, and that's my current favorite that's on the market now. As far as the feeling goes, it's to me the closest to like a grand piano that I've played.
I have several questions for you.
Sure.
But I will not ask them unless I have time. But I did have a suggestion for anyone looking for composers, like was asked, the composer competition people are screening this week, so you can go listen and hear what they sound like in the next couple days.
That's great. I didn't know about that, so good.
So,
Yeah.
But my question was about social media. I kind of avoided it because I always get addicted. But
That's understandable.
Sounds like a necessary evil. So, how do you recommend approaching social media, making content? How do you come up with what you're posting? General thoughts.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you feel like personally like it's not a good option for you to have social media, and I understand that completely. But if you're going to, I would say, oftentimes, I'm honestly, it's funny, I'm saying like I've gotten jobs through that, but I'm like not super tech savvy when it comes to like that kind of thing. And so I'm sure I'm doing it like very like the old school way, but like reels are a big thing I think now. I don't know, I can't keep up with like what people are watching, but I know that like if you, I do a kind of combination of like different projects that I'm working on. I do this thing called Movie Theme Monday where I just like throw up a theme I've written or like a snippet of a theme, and I do it like once a week, that kind of thing. But then I do tutorials as well. Or my recent thing has been behind the score, where I'll talk about a film I've worked on and kind of take a peek behind the score and how I composed it and all that. So educational kind of stuff like that too. Even for people who aren't pursuing film scoring, I think people find it interesting, you know. And it also, it gives them, like I said, it's kind of showing your portfolio, also showing them like what you're working on, and just trying to stay active, even if it's just like, hey, we're in the middle of a string session right now, and we're doing the music for this movie or whatever, collaborating with the director and the, I don't always do this super well, honestly. I can go through periods of time where I'm not posting, you know, but I've found that it helps, and it helps people know like that you're actively in that space, and you're, you know, sometimes people are forgetful. They might forget that you're a composer, you know. Oh yeah, I forgot he does music. I need to reach out to him. You know, it just kind of keeps you on the radar, I feel like. Yeah, but.
Tyler, you also do family and zany stuff. So I know more. But one of the things you also do, Tyler, is like you're doing just like you let me know you have a family, you have a wife, you have children, your culture, your coat thing, like totally unrelated to your fashion show stuff.
Oh, my fashion stuff. That's a whole other
Totally unrelated to
separate
music.
career I'm pursuing on the side. But yes.
Totally unrelated, but very helpful to understand who you are.
Right. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. That's. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, there you go. Yeah. And once again, that's what comes down to the relational side of it, letting just showing those different sides of yourself, and as you get to know each other and have a relationship, it just helps for sure.
Where is the best place to learn to compose if you've never done it before? Preferably a free place.
A free place. There are a lot of great resources actually out there that are free. There are. I mean, honestly, there's so many free tutorials like online now. It's kind of crazy, actually, if I think back to like when I was starting out. But at the same time, not. Gosh, how do I say this? I feel like I'm always in that place of like I want to keep learning. And composers, I think there's always more to learn. There's always like musical things that haven't been written yet and all that. But it can be overwhelming, I know, jumping into this, because it's not just like the composing, it's like the tech side of it, like we've been talking about today. It's the software, there's so many different facets. And there's a lot of, I mean, YouTube tutorials have changed the game a lot with as far as like, if you want to learn how to do something, you can search it and pretty much find anything. I troubleshoot all the time. Even with software things where I'm having an issue, I usually will find the answer. But additionally, too, finding people who are further ahead than you in that field, and just having a relationship and asking questions is also really good, too. I have those people in my life who, if I'm running into an issue, I call them, and I say, I need help me, That's super helpful as well. I think shadowing, which I said I was going to talk about some of the things that I wish I had done, and one of them would be, I had the opportunity to do this, but I didn't take it, but like getting around other composers and either shadowing or interning, being in that environment, I think is super, super helpful, and it would have helped me a lot in the beginning stages. Jake Colby over here has been interning for me for like the past year-ish, I don't know, is that about right? And so he's sat in on multiple different projects I'm working on. I've even hired him to help me with one of the films I worked on last year as I was approaching a very, very short deadline. We had to record live strings, and I had to get all the stems exported and into Pro Tools, and he had to set all those sessions up for me. It was between me, Jake, and ChatGPT we figured it out, but we did it. So anyways, what Jake's doing, I'm like, I wish I could have told myself back then, hey, go find somebody who's doing this and just get in the room with them, ask questions, and just learn from being in the environment. So that's, in my opinion, that would be super, super helpful.
So this is both a word and a question. So we were trying to get as many student music score people on one of our projects, and they would all write us really serious, minor, vague film scores, but we needed happy, childlike. And for whatever reason, and you can talk about this, but for the beginning film score composer, writing happy music was almost impossible for us to get it from them. Like, it either sounded like country western bluegrass or this epic, big film score. And it felt like, for some reason, it was easier to write minor and epic than happy and thoughtful. Anyway.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I'll use your movie as an example, actually, We Three Kings, because you guys, we had a conversation about it leading up to it, and it's a period film, and they wanted it to be like, a pretty classical, like orchestral score, but they didn't want it to be too heavy, I think we had these conversations, like, there's some heavy material in it, but it's like, it needed to be lighthearted too. I think, and I talked about this yesterday, but like this is when it comes down to that, like I talked about the setting element and the palette you're making for your film. That can be that can be the sounds you choose, but also even like you're saying, not making it too minor, not like, for example, their movie had to do with a John Henry Hopkins Jr., who wrote We Three Kings. It's about his nieces and nephews, essentially, and him, and kind of the story of how that song came about. And one of the characters is a kind of aspiring pianist, and she's not that amazing. She's learning, And so there's the simple childlike feel that there needed to be in the movie with those characters. And so I think going in that more lighthearted and appropriate to the time, like there's other period movies I've done that have been super intense, like Washington's Armor, for example, is like this epic hybrid, like Hans Zimmer-esque score. But We Three Kings was not supposed to be that. It would have been inappropriate to like put a big electric guitar and all that kind of stuff. So I think being sensitive to what you're seeing on screen, and that was what, honestly, I think I complimented your score today, is that it was super sensitive to what was going on screen. And the type of movie that you're scoring. It's very important to make those decisions in the beginning, I think.
I have a comment to that thing there. I think it might be the state of music today. if you're talking about somebody maybe under 40, 35, 40-year-olds, might be the state of pop music today. All the music is kind of in minor keys, whereas one time it was like maybe in the 80s or something like that, you had more major keys.
Mhm.
So it's maybe just the state of music today. So people are struggling. If you're talking about someone young, might be struggling with
Right.
writing.
Exactly. And yeah, it probably has a lot to do with what we're listening to nowadays, you know. I mean, me personally, a lot of the stuff I listen to is pretty old, and even film scores. I love a combination of stuff from like the golden age of Hollywood to like the 90s kind of scores that were happening around that time. I do listen to some of the newer ones, but when I'm just listening for my enjoyment, it's John Williams scores from like the 90s and, you know, Alan Silvestri and all that. Like, that was my golden age of my childhood of like those types of scores. So it's probably a personal taste thing, but that's what I'm kind of taking in, you know. So I guess it's kind of I guess what you take in is really important.
I'm surprised the topic hasn't shown up here in the film, but I've been to several songwriter conferences over the last couple of years, and AI is all you talk about. So can you talk a little bit about how AI is affecting you as a film person?
Sure. There are some elements of AI that are helpful and that I use, I guess. Not the way people think, maybe, though. I'm not, you know, there's, I think in a recent update, probably in the past, like, few years, AI was implemented into Logic Pro, the DAW that I use, and there's different features that are artificial intelligence, technically, you know. But I mainly just use them for, like, there are plugins that are, like there's a mastering plugin where it can analyze your track and then, you know, set the parameters where they need to be, you know. I use things like that. I don't usually use the musical AI, you know. They have a whole thing in Logic where you can build a whole band that's all, it's basically an AI band that just like plays along to your track. I don't know, I'm still pretty old school with all that kind of stuff. Now I do use ChatGPT quite a bit for troubleshooting and all that, but that's less musical, you know. I think it's going to have an effect. You know, it's affected every industry, but it hasn't changed much of my process, I guess.
Once you have a melody or a starting idea for a project, what are the first steps to filling it out? Like, if I have Logic Pro, primarily just the basic MIDI stuff. I have a MIDI keyboard and the basic plugins. So what are the first steps that I could do to start filling it out, making it sound more full and more real, I guess?
Okay, more full and more real. So you're talking about taking an idea that's like, maybe like on piano, you've come up with a melody or something like that, and you want to fill it out. Is that kind of the idea? Well, I think first, like I talked about, you need to figure out like, is this for a film, or are you just composing an idea, like just from scratch, or just kind of?
I started working on a short film.
On a short film, okay. So, were you here yesterday, or? Okay, so some of that stuff I talked about with like setting, like figuring out like what's your palette going to be for this, because the thing with music is it's so versatile, and scores are too. Like you can take it so many different directions. As we heard today in the composer competition, each composer did something completely different, and they were all good in different ways. You know, so like I think deciding, look at your film first, and whatever director you're working with. You know, talk through like what's going to be an appropriate accompaniment like for a film like this, and how am I going to orchestrate it? How am I going to take the next steps? It's kind of a learned process and an experience-driven kind of thing where a lot of times you try some different things. Like you might throw out the first idea you come up with, like I think I want to accompany it with strings, you know, underneath this piano melody, and they're like, oh, that's feeling too heavy. Let me try something simpler. Or you know, it is every project I work on is different. Every process is a little bit different, but it's something that as you experiment and you start to feel it out, it kind of you'll get the hang of it. It takes time.
Thank you.
What are your tips on building a cue sheet with a director who's doesn't use musical terms necessarily, and what kind of questions do you ask to get into their head and start feeling what they're feeling so that you can then speak that in their language.
Glad you brought that up, because I have as I've continued to work on feature films, particularly the last one I worked on was, like I had mentioned, a very, very short turnaround time. And so there wasn't a lot of time to waste. We had to do things very quickly. And so I'm not the best at organization sometimes, as far as like remembering what cue is what. You know, you got to like naming your cues and categorizing them and everything. One thing that I did with this project, as we were spotting the film, I think what you're talking about right now, is going through the film with the director. You're talking through, hey, this is what I'm feeling for this scene. You're going from start to finish, talking about the different musical ins and outs and cue points. But I made a document that is basically a cue, I call it a cue list because it's not technically the cue sheet, but it is kind of the basis of the cue sheet. And I'm going to pull it up and show you what it looks like. This was for the Christmas Ring film I did last year. And as we were going through the movie, this is basically what the different cues look like. So like the first one, I have the name right here. I have the time code of when that music is supposed to start. And then I have notes on it too, like for example, Vanessa's theme variation. That was one of the characters. And as we were talking about it, I was like, I think this is, her theme needs to play here. So like giving myself some kind of clue of, remember, like this is what I'm feeling initially in the moment. And then I have this thing called approval status, which is like, this is, green, to me, is such a beautiful color now because it means it's done. So approval status, you got to get approval from the director before you can sign off on it. So that is, and by the way, I have this, on the QR code I sent to everyone, I have like a template that you can download that looks like this for your films, just as a resource, so you guys can download that and have that for whatever project you're working on. Sometimes the approval status might say revision needed, okay, and have that indicated. And now this I don't like this color because it's a rewrite color, and that's a total rewrite when it's the whole thing needs to be redone. But that happens, so just categorizing them and being able to visually see where it helps you see your progress too on the score. Like, and I don't know, green just feels good when it's done. And this whole sheet is green. It was one of the best feelings of my life. It was amazing. So this is super, super helpful to keep track of each cue and kind of where you're at in the process. And since we did live strings on this score, so that was an element as well where I said, what is the score status? Is it notated yet? Because that's another step in the process. So in order to make it green, we have to have a name, a time code, any notes that are there, approval status, score. What about the live? Is it tracked yet? And then the mix, when the mix is complete, and then you can make the whole thing green. So that's just a way of organizing. I'm going to do this on every score now from now on because it helped me a lot before. And when you're in the middle of it and you're jumping between cues and going back to like cue number 4 when you're working on the cue number 15, it can get really confusing. So keeping things, I think, as orderly as possible is super helpful. And also, like you were asking about talking to the director and stuff, it keeps things really clear. Like as you're doing that spotting session, you guys are talking through themes. You can write these notes down that you talk with, you're talking to him about to keep things. His input, because sometimes it's hard to remember. You're going through like, I think there were over 30 cues in the movie, so it's like, how are you going to remember what a keeper cue was supposed to be? All that. So it helps keep things just tracked and in order. So I highly recommend doing that. And then it makes it really easy when oftentimes they'll come and ask me for help with a cue sheet that they're making, and I basically have kind of all the information that's needed for the cue sheet as far as time code and title and stuff. Obviously, you have to make some tweaks to how it's written, but this will kind of give you all the information you need, because that's another thing that can take a lot of time. If they come to me and ask for the cue sheet, well, I didn't keep track of the cues. It's like you're going to have to go back, watch the whole movie, remember what this cue was called, and then input all the information. So anyways, it made that process so much easier.
Anyone? Okay.
When you're making a score for a movie, what skills do you outsource? Like mixing, orchestra, whatever.
Great question. And I know this can be a hard thing when you're starting out because oftentimes you don't have budgets that can be allocated to those different aspects. So in a way, that's a plus because you learn to do a lot of things by yourself. And in the beginning, I learned, I got the hang of mixing orchestral music over time because it can be expensive to hire somebody to mix a score. It's a lot of music to mix. So I still, to this day, sometimes mix my own scores. If the budget is there, I will hire somebody else. Like on this one, you see the mix side over there. I was handing off all these cues to an actual sound engineer that ended up mixing it. But there's still times where I mix my own scores. And so it just depends on depends on budget, obviously, because you have to factor that in. As far as live instrumentation, the nice thing is, even if you don't have budget to do a full string section, you can get creative. You can hire a soloist to come in and play and then program, or you can do hire a quartet to play and then kind of augment with samples and make it work in that way. I call that kind of like a hybrid string recording. To be honest, even modern day scores, they still use some of the program stuff in with the live orchestra anyways. It's like adds this kind of layer to it that it really, even on this score that we did live strings, we kept a layer of sampled strings in there. It fills it out more. And when you take them out, it kind of loses something. So be sensitive, obviously, to what your budget is, see what you can do. But I think anytime I've brought people in to lend their voice to a score creatively, I'm always happy in the end. Like, that was a great collaboration. Even if it's minimal, even if they're just in a few featured moments. In fact, on this Daniel film that I'm scoring, I've hired an Israeli musician to play all these crazy ethnic instruments. We connected, and he's gonna play some key themes in the film. So I was happy that I connected with him. I think it's gonna really add a lot to that score. But once again, you got to look back at the budget, see if it's possible, and if you don't feel like you can take any out of what you're getting as the composer, I try to keep these things separate if I can. Go have a conversation with the director and say, hey, I really want to bring this person in. I think it's going to add a lot of value to the score, and just see if there's a way that they can make it work within their budget.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Okay.
I have two questions looped into one because they kind of connect to each other. I was going to ask, walk us through writing a cold email, and then when you get to the referral stage, are they just coming to you with a referral? Do you ask for a referral? If so, how do you do that? When is it most appropriate to do that? How do you not bungle it?
So the first question is how do you write a cold email? The second is how do you get a referral? Is that what you're saying, kind of, or how do you? Basically. Okay. I'm gonna do something potentially super embarrassing right now, but I can't find it. I was actually going to try to find that email from years ago. I can't find it. But okay, I'll walk you through it. So basically, I would start with an introduction of, I'll walk you through how I would do it. Okay, my name is Tyler Michael Smith. I'm a composer from the Nashville area. I compose music for feature films, documentaries, short films, and I love to connect with other creatives in the industry. And if it's from if it's a Christian company, I'll be like, I love to connect with other believers in the industry, and I would love to see if there's a possibility of collaboration. Here's some samples of some work that I've done. I look forward to hearing from you, Tyler Smith. Simple as that. Just make it clear what you do, and some place that you're going to lead them to that exhibits your work. I think it's kind of, it doesn't have to be, I wouldn't make it super long, make it short, concise, and to the point, And then on the referral side of things, that's something that you kind of earn through experience, of working with that person is, like I said, be easy to work with, have a good relationship with that director, obviously do excellent work. It's going to be a combination of both of those things. It's, hey, this guy does great work, and he's also a great guy, and he's really good to work with. You know, those two things are going to, I think, lead to more referrals.
Okay, so you're pretty much saying it comes to you, like, are there jobs that you had gotten from asking for a referral that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise? Like, you finish a project and you're like, hey, if there's anyone else you know that might be looking for this, or is that going too far? It's better to just let them do it.
I usually never say that, actually.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, I usually don't. I think a better way to do it is to earn that referral through, you know, your work and your relationship with that person, and because they will. I mean, if you really do good work, you'll get remembered and you will be referred. That's just kind of been my experience, at least.
If somebody has a short question, we have 2 minutes left. Anyone?
Short question.
No one?
How many instruments do I play? I'm just going to be honest. I've proficiently one, piano, and I sing. I play a little. I fool around on the guitar, not really much. So, but that's why it's important to have good friends who are talented too. You know, and then you can bring them into your project. Yeah. So, if I need guitar, it's always a call. You know. But I like that collaboration aspect of scoring, so I kind of am glad that I don't play everything, because it's like it gives you opportunity to work with other people, and they also, I don't know, it's, to me, like I said, I'm always thankful when someone else lends their voice to a project, because it's like sometimes they do things that you wouldn't have thought of, you know, it adds, and I like to give those people credit too, if they're like a genuine part of the score. I like to say featuring whoever that player is, even if it's a soloist or whatever. I think it's, yeah, I love that collaboration.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time. And your
Yeah,
knowledge,
absolutely.
wisdom,
Thanks for having me.
hopes into your life.